population that knows we are proud to be the Stinky Onion. And you have it in your back pocket for your next dinner party too. As we make our way now onto the main branch of the Chicago Riverwalk. A beautiful photo op. As we enter this canyon, we're going to start by going to a brand new construction here to our right. Two 700-ish foot tall skyscrapers will be built there, but this has looked relatively the same since 2008. That plot of land was originally going to be home to the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, but after about a year of construction, the financial crisis in 2008 hit, financing fell through, and it's looked pretty much as it does today since I first took my tour on shoreline sightseeing on my 8th grade field trip in 2008. So it won't be 2,000 feet tall, but there is a bit of a closing of a circle there at the entrance to the river. In the meantime, let's go to our newest super tall. Not too far away, certainly not 2,000 feet, but this is 1,191 feet, which is enough to put it at number 3 in our skyline. The St. Regis, Chicago, named for the luxury hotel. It's also a residence, 5-star amenities all across the board. And it was designed by a Chicago architect called Jeannie Gang, G-A-N-G. She's a good name to know, and she's breaking her own record here. This is the tallest building in the world, designed by a woman-owned Arthur Genius Grant for architecture. She's a big name already, but it seems like there's still room for her to grow. Iconic at Michigan Avenue, a beautiful white clock tower at the Wrigley Building from 1921. For me, this really well represents not only its style, but also a trend of the time. In the early 1900s, a time when architects across a number of different styles were looking to the past for their inspiration, across oceans and centuries, oftentimes to already existing architecture. So, Charles Biersman, the architect behind the Wrigley, he modeled it after La Giralda Tower in Sevilla, Spain, a Spanish cathedral as inspiration for an office building. Pretty well executed, I'd argue, beautifully maintained over the years. And as you look closer, you'll see what is maintained is terracotta. There are 250,000 tiles of clay on the side of the Wrigley. Pretty delicate as far as building materials come. So to keep it looking this good, 100 years later, they hand wash the building every couple of years, all so that we can sit on a boat and take photos of it on our iPhones. I don't know about you, I try not to hand wash my dishes if I can avoid it. So I'm glad somebody else takes care of this, so we can just enjoy. Always a favorite, at least for me. So if architects were looking far away for inspiration 100 years ago or more recently architects have been looking close to home for inspiration with an idea called contextualism. We have an example in Trump Tower from 2009 by Chicago architect Adrian Smith, the second tallest in the city, and again, the style here is called contextualism. So context is the takeaway. It's a way that buildings acknowledge their surroundings. As you look up, you'll see 3 large balconies. They're setbacks. Each setback here is set at the height of a surrounding building. The first was the height of the building we just talked about, the Wrigley. The second setback we can trace across the river to Mather Tower, this sort of terracotta rocket ship, and the tallest setback is the height of the building just behind it. AMA Plaza, built for IBM in 1971 in the modernist style of architecture. In fact, this black box isn't any black box. It's the last work by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, the father of modernism, so why not start with the best if we can? Modernism is just that, a glass and steel black box. Mies van der Rohe is the guy who sort of coined the phrase, less is more. It's not about doing a lot, it's about doing a few things really, really well. And he was coming out of this era where decoration was sort of expected. He thought a lot of it was pretty bad. So he said God is in the details. The closer you look, the more everything must be in its place. Also a professor of architecture, one of his students disagreed with him. Pretty sure, because one of his students designed these corncob towers right next door. Bertrand Goldberg's Marina City from the 1960s. Certainly iconic in our skyline at this point, and because Mies van der Rohe was his professor, Bertrand Goldberg sort of had to explain himself over the years. And he sort of explained that he, as an artist, felt most inspired in nature. He's never seen a right angle in nature. He decided his life's work, he didn't want it to be a box. Instead, curved concrete was born out. One of our most photographed as well. Across the river, we'll also find concrete from the 1960s, but in a certainly different form. This is Brutalism at 55 West Wacker. Shorter in the shadows, often overlooked, arguably. Béton brut in French means raw concrete, and that was actually the point. Make it a fortress for the law firms, banks, and insurance companies that often wanted to work in there. Ironically, they don't really like it today. It's hard to maintain, and a lot of people think brutalism is ugly. But sort of with anything that becomes more scarce, the stuff we have becomes more valuable, especially historically speaking. As we go forward and to the right next, red brick and a clock tower at the Reed Murdoch Center. This is from 1914, beautifully preserved. Prairie School architecture here. Red brick is the first major clue. Horizontal lines sprawling outward like the prairie, as well as images of wheat. Frank Lloyd Wright popularized this style with his homes. There's something strange about having such a long building in a city known for its tall skyscrapers, but like with the Prairie School, like with the Midwest. Across the river, we'll also find concrete from the 1960s, but in a certainly different form. This is Brutalism at 55 West Wacker. Shorter in the shadows, often overlooked, arguably. Béton brut in French means raw concrete, and that was actually the point. Make it a fortress for the law firms, banks, and insurance companies that often wanted to work in there. Ironically, they don't really like it today. It's hard to maintain, and a lot of people think brutalism is ugly. But sort of with anything that becomes more scarce, the stuff we have becomes more valuable, especially historically speaking. As we go forward and to the right next, red brick and a clock tower at the Reed Murdoch Center. This is from 1914, beautifully preserved. Prairie School architecture here. Red brick is the first major clue. Horizontal lines sprawling outward like the prairie, as well as images of wheat. Frank Lloyd Wright popularized this style with his homes. There's something strange about having such a long building in a city known for its tall skyscrapers, but like with the Prairie School, like with the Midwest. Limestone siding, long vertical lines, and dark setback spandrels near each window. That's how we know it's Art Deco. Kind of the Great Gatsby era. This originally built as Marshall Field's department store warehouse. Pretty ritzy warehouse to have. The heads facing away from us take us back to that time. They're called the Merchant Princes, Montgomery Ward, Wanamaker, Sears. As long as I've been around, I've never heard them called that. I've always heard them called the Pez dispensers of Chicago. Seems more fitting. Apparently David Letterman can take credit for that. And we'll see it again later on in the tour, a little better view. We're going to pass everything today twice, so I'm going to skip some stuff on purpose because I've learned it's good to have something to talk about for the second half of the tour. In the meantime, we're making our way out to Wolf Point, where the main branch, the north branch, and the south branch of the river meet. The confluence, essentially. And there's a lot to look at here. Sort of fitting since this is our first town center. There's been a lot